I think what counts is the result and the sound you get, not necessarily how you got there. When you're working on a really tough problem, you can sometimes suddenly discover a way to do it that sounds the same, but for some reason, for one reason or another, is easier, more intuitive. Hi, this is Augustin. This is another episode of Ask Augustin in cooperation with Tonebase. In this episode, I'm going to present a couple of tricks that can make some really tough passages easier, even though they sound exactly like what's printed. What I'm doing is actually slightly different, but I always think what really counts is not doing it correctly. What really counts is that it sounds great, and it's the result that counts, what it sounds like. So I'm going to first play it with the trick, so to speak, and then you can see if you can catch what exactly I did that's not exactly as printed, and then I will reveal it afterwards. So one of them is... So the trick is, I am not playing this E. I'm playing an open string, and because of the speed at which the passage moves, the violin does not want to, is always reluctant to change octaves, so this will sound as one octave higher. It gives me extra time to get the hand down to the third position, and actually it's quite leisurely. It's plenty of time, and this E, which is really an open string, but it sounds like this, is actually even clearer and even cleaner than it would be if I played it with the fingering. If I actually had a finger on it, the way it might look when you first look at the music. This is a trick that I first saw written as a fingering in an edition by Carl Flesch, but it actually works in many circumstances where you have a fast run and at one point there is an E, so you can catch it this way. Here's another one when doing chromatic glissandi. Instead of doing it just with the left hand, I also add a bit of portato from the bow. The idea behind this technique is that instead of doing the chromatic glissando solely with the left hand fingers, which makes it hard to control the speed, I add a bit of portato to it, and actually, as I'm adding more portato, I start defining the notes less with the left hand. So I go with the left hand and with the right hand I start the portato gradually. So as a result I get a slightly clearer definition of the notes, and I have more control over the timing of them, of the accelerando as I go down, and I know that it's the right number of notes, because sometimes when you let the left hand do it, you might end up maybe with an extra note that you didn't want to have. So instead of having the 12 notes, you might suddenly have 13 or 11 or something. And this way I can control the kind of falling of the notes. And I do this often with chromatic glissandos. I find that it gives it a nice direction. This isn't a trick in the sense that it makes it easier. I just like the way that it comes out for myself. But it is an example of doing something not precisely the way that it's written or usually taught, but actually eventually arriving at something that sounds like the same thing, or might even sound better for you in some people's cases. So there are some things that I've learned from cellists. When I was growing up, my oldest brother played the cello. My father also played the cello, and I saw a lot of cellists play. And I always saw them use so many harmonics all over the place as they moved up and down the cello, particularly in arpeggios, but also sometimes along the way as they were going up and down. I asked myself the question, why don't violinists ever do this? And instead, the way it's often taught is that arpeggios, you use the same fingering for every key, basically, and so forth. And even though in some keys, you actually have very, very useful harmonics that are along the way that could be taken that eliminate some shifting noises. So I got into the habit of basically using different fingerings depending on what key I'm in, depending on what harmonics are available. So in G major, I might... In A major, I might use this harmonic, or even use it this way. This plays in Tchaikovsky concerto. I'm using the harmonic along the way. I find that it can sometimes make things a lot clearer because those harmonic notes are guaranteed to be in tune, as long as your violin is in tune, that is. And I don't see a reason not to incorporate them. I often use harmonics also on the way down or up as a part of scales. And this is quite a personal thing for me. I don't see a lot of violinists do this, but in the cello world, I actually see it all the time. I think it comes from the fact that it is genuinely just harder to get around on a cello because of the distances. And so this is kind of necessary to use the harmonics that you have along the way. But I think it actually works quite well on the violin and can sometimes get cleaner, clearer sound in doing arpeggios and scales. So a pretty common cheat that you see sometimes is the idea of playing the lower notes of octaves louder than the upper notes. And that can work up to a point, but I think it becomes a problem. Sometimes I've seen violinists play where I no longer hear the upper note. I'm hearing like... And it sounds in tune, but it's no longer an octave. So if you do that, you have to make sure that always... that it's still an octave. It can be a nice idea to weight the bottom note stronger than the upper one because it gives it a richer sound and it makes it sound rounder, and the two notes will resonate better with one another. So in that sense, it makes it sound better, but it doesn't... If you feel like it makes the intonation easier, then maybe you're no longer playing the upper note. I hope some of these things are helpful. You might, in the course of practicing different things, when you're working on a really tough problem, you can sometimes suddenly discover a way to do it that sounds the same, but for some reason, for one reason or another, is easier, more intuitive, or might sound even better. I think what counts is the result and the sound you get, not necessarily how you got there. I hope that's helpful, and see you next time.